Anyway, Senator Cotton, great to have you back. Thank you for being with us. There's a lot of news that is unfolding as it relates to the deep state. John Solomon will be with us at the bottom of the hour, and his report on James Comey is very breathtaking in terms of they have smoking gun evidence, according to John, that in fact there was purposeful leaks of classified information to reporters coming from Comey directly himself. He's going to lay out the case. He's got all the documents. He put them up on his website. And then, of course, we have James Comer today finding out that, with the most informative interview of his probe so far into this conspiracy, that he only met twice, meaning Ian Sams, who testified today, only met twice with Biden. But he was saying, it's a conspiracy theory if you dare talk about his cognitive state. And Mike Howell, president of the Oversight Project, is pointing out that Biden's own Justice Department was warning directly that these last-minute pardons and commutations were not going to be legal, and he lists 4 specific reasons why, and nobody paid attention to them. And on top of that, the FBI Director Kash Patel said there was no constitutional basis, no lawful predicate for Biden's Justice Department and FBI to carry out the raid at Mar-a-Lago. There's a lot going on. Everything that we had been reporting on seems to be, more and more evidence is coming out every day that it was all true. Your reaction to all of it?
Sean, there certainly is a lot going on this front, and I think it's important that the Democratic politicians and the bureaucrats who perpetuated the Russia collusion hoax are being exposed and will be held accountable. Some of them, it seems like, from what I've learned, may be held criminally accountable in certain cases. But we also have the important reforms that Tulsi Gabbard announced this week. The DNI has grown bloated and bureaucratic from its original intent of Congress 20 years ago. This is something she and I discussed in our first conversation after President Trump nominated her. We both addressed in her confirmation hearings. And at my committee, the Intelligence Committee, passed legislation to help implement a couple months ago that I expect to pass Congress later this year. I mean, the DNI does not collect intelligence. They don't have agents running around the world. They don't have satellites. They're supposed to be a coordinating function. They're not supposed to be involved in politicizing intelligence, really giving directives on how agencies use their own internal assets. But when you have as many people as the DNI has had in recent years, it does open up the possibility of mischief making. When people don't have legitimate intelligence functions and responsibilities on the plate, then they start cooking up the kind of things that justify their jobs and their budgets and so forth. So what Director Gabbard announced this week is an important first step. We've been working with her closely. Some of the problems with the DNI, I'll confess, Sean, are the problems of Congress over the last 20 years, imposing new mandates on them, creating centers that are superfluous or not related to intelligence at all. And it's going to take our legislation to eliminate those offices and those centers so the DNI can get back to its original focus of ensuring that intelligence is coordinated across all the agencies while letting those agencies do their primary job.
What do you make of Tulsi's declassification and what we learned as it relates to the 2016 election? And I asked her the other night on TV, I said, so is it your assessment that what happened in 2016 is that deep state actors tried to use phony information about a Russia connection to Donald Trump that they knew didn't exist so that it would help Hillary win the election? And do you believe that after they lost the election and senior career intelligence officials ascertained with their intelligence analysis that there was no Trump-Russia collusion and that Obama and his top lieutenants didn't like that assessment, and they came up with a new assessment that said just the opposite, and then they used the dirty Russian disinformation dossier that was bought and paid for by Hillary to write a new assessment to make Donald Trump look bad? What do you make of all of that? Is that criminal to you?
Sean, from what Tulsi Gabbard has released, and for as well what John Ratcliffe at the CIA has released, and that comes from senior career intelligence officials at the CIA, it appears that this rot came from the Democratic political appointees. In fact, one of the batches of releases from the DNI about a month ago showed that you had career officials who were pushing back against Jim Clapper and against John Brennan and against Jim Comey, saying they shouldn't proceed. So in some ways, it's the intelligence officials that were trying to protect the reputation and integrity of their own work and their agencies against these Democratic political appointees. I think that's what took a lot of people, or what struck a lot of people, is that it really started at the top. And it seems to, Sean, have frankly gone all the way up to the very top with Barack Obama in the transition period of 2016 and 2017. And if it's proven out by FBI investigation and with Department of Justice prosecutors that any of these people were involved in violating the law, then certainly if the statute of limitations has not run, then they would face criminal liability, as they should, for engaging in criminal misconduct.
Well, I mean, when you think of all of that, and then you factor in if in fact we have deep state, powerful actors that are using the intelligence community and what should be the greatest law enforcement agency in the entire world, the FBI, and they're putting cinder blocks on the scales of elections. I would argue they did the same thing in 2020 because the FBI knew that Rudy Giuliani's attorney, Bob Costello, had a copy of Hunter Biden's laptop. They knew that story would break. They verified the authenticity of the laptop in March of 2020. They went about the process in the summer of 2020 of meeting with big tech companies every single week, warning them they may be victims of a disinformation campaign. It may be about Hunter. It may be about Joe Biden. And then sure enough, the story breaks, and Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, then Facebook, and Jack Dorsey of then Twitter, call and say, is this what you were warning us about? And they would not tell them what they knew to be true, that it was authentic, that it was real, that they had verified such. Is that putting cinder blocks on the scale of an election?
It certainly sounds like it, Sean, and it is really important that we get to the bottom of all this, that all appropriate material is declassified and released, because it's not enough just to have people like Pam Bondi and Kash Patel in charge now and be confident that this is not going to happen again, at least for the next 3.5 years. It really is necessary to expose what happened and hold those people to account. Even if, let's say, a statute of limitations has exposed, hold them publicly to account so it never happens again. So no unelected bureaucrat or no Democratic appointee in the future thinks that they can use law enforcement or intelligence agencies to influence domestic politics here in America.
It's pretty unbelievable. And, now that we're learning from Kash Patel that the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, literally he determined that it was illegal. And he said, now's the time for accountability. He said there was no constitutional basis, no lawful predicate for it. And then, of course, one of the top stories of the day, the president now celebrating his victory over over Letitia James and this ridiculous settlement of $515 million as it, relates to a mortgage case, which is unprecedented, and a judge that, stood by a valuation of Mar-a-Lago of $18 million when it's $1 billion to $1.5 billion, and they got away with all of that. And all of the other lawfare, the novel legal theory of Alvin Bragg, the raid of Mar-a-Lago, all of these things combined, I mean, to me, that's more election interference. That's more that their job then was to bloody up Donald Trump to make him, render him not a viable candidate for president, in my view.
Yeah, Sean, to borrow a phrase from our Democratic friends, it sounds to me like a threat to democracy. And it's so funny that they always levy that charge against President Trump and against us when they're the ones who, again, over the last 10 years have repeatedly used law enforcement and litigation to try to tar Donald Trump, to try to convict him and imprison him for the rest of his life, or in the case that was just overturned today, to fine him $500 million for what, Sean? Taking out loans that he repaid. I remember when that judgment first came down last year. I was talking to a farmer in Arkansas, and he's like, what are they even talking about up there? You take out a loan, you repay it all. Who's the victim? I bet the banks are happy. And they were happy.
Well,
of course.
Well, that was the case. I mean, it was in the case of the non-disclosure agreement. It was a legal non-disclosure agreement. It was put together by a lawyer. It was labeled a legal expense. The statute of limitations had run out. It was a misdemeanor to begin with in the state of New York, even though the statute of limitations had run out. And then to come up with this novel legal theory and then send the third highest ranking DOJ official from the Biden Justice Department to help out Alvin Bragg tells me they wanted that conviction as badly, again, to bloody up Trump and render him unelectable.
Yeah, now, fortunately, Sean, it backfired on them. But again, it's just an example of how they need to be exposed so this never happens again. You say, they had a legal theory that gussied up what was a misdemeanor into a felony. They never even adequately explained the legal theory. The liberal judge that presided over this case and allowed the conviction to go forward or allowed the case to go to a jury at all never explained the legal theory, period. They were willing to break any rule, any procedure, any custom, all in an effort to get Trump, to bankrupt him, to convict him, to imprison him. Thank goodness the American people saw through it all and did not allow it to influence their choice in the election last year.
All right, quick break. We'll come back more with Senator Tom Cotton, great state of Arkansas, as we continue with him. And then John Solomon has breaking news regarding James Comey and the leaking of intelligence and information, classified information. He feels he has smoking gun evidence. He'll share that with us at the bottom of the hour. We'll have full coverage of all of this on Hannity tonight on the Fox News Channel. Quick break, right back. We'll continue. All right, we continue now with Senator Tom Cotton, great state of Arkansas, is with us. A lot of people listening to this show will think back and they'll remember investigations that we've had. Hillary Clinton's dirty, bought and paid for dossier. James Comey protecting Hillary with, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute. But then, of course, a double standard occurred when Mar-a-Lago got raided, and she did not have the protections that Donald Trump did with the Presidential Authorization Act, where he had access to these papers. She never had the ability to take them with her. The same with Joe Biden. Again, a double standard, a dual justice system. And I just wonder, and I know my audience is wondering, because everybody I talk to says, do you think something's going to happen this time? Are people really going to be held accountable for what they've done here?
Sean, I am, because I have confidence in Kash Patel and Pam Bondi to follow the law and to not break the rules the Democrats did while being aggressive within the law. And Sean, I predict that if charges are brought against any of these 30 Democratic players, and they happen to involve the charges that are so often been brought against Republicans over the past several decades, lying to Congress, lying to federal investigators, obstruction of justice. You're going to hear wailing and crying from Democrats and from liberals in the media about how this happens all the time and these are not serious actions and they're engaged in legal warfare when it's A-OK against Donald Trump, or for that matter, against Ronald Reagan's appointees or against George W. Bush's appointees. It was all fine and dandy back then, and it was a matter of high principle. But when the shoe's on the other foot, and Democrats are being held accountable for things like lying to federal investigators or obstruction of justice or conspiracy against civil rights, then all of a sudden those charges are not going to be serious at all in the case where everyone does it. And Donald Trump's DOJ under Pam Bondi and Kash Patel is engaging in outrageous misconduct. Just mark my words, Sean, when you hear that. But I'm confident that Pam and Kash, if there are a legal case to be made, and it's colorable under the law and under precedence, will move forward to hold these people accountable.
It is amazing that these, all this information, that they didn't get rid of it. These burn bags, they left them there. This information, this paper trail, they left it there. They're supposed to be so clever and so smart. You would think they would have covered their own tracks, but the discoveries that they're making every day, frankly, take my breath away. And as somebody who reported on all of these issues, I spent, 4 years of my life reporting on Russia, and it even extends beyond that. It is kind of breathtaking. But Senator Tom Cotton, we always appreciate you being with us. Thank you, sir.